They needed you once, and you gave them everything. Your time, your energy, your presence. But something shifted. The more available you became, the less they valued you. Your messages were left unread. Your loyalty mocked in silence. You thought showing up would make them stay, but it only made them disappear. Why? Because in a world addicted to scarcity, availability is seen a weakness, and influence dies in the hands of the overly present. Machiavelli warned us, now it's time you understand why. When a stimulus becomes constant, the mind begins to tune it out. What once sparked anticipation becomes background noise. This isn't a flaw. It's biological economy. Scarcity signals value. Abundance dulls desire. In social dynamics, the same pattern unfolds. The person always present is the first to be overlooked. Overexposure deteriorates authority, and influence evaporates in the heat of excessive familiarity. You gave too much of yourself, too often, too quickly, and in their eyes, you stopped being a person and became a fixture. There was no edge to your presence, no friction. You were always available, always responding, always present. That constant access made you forgettable, not because you lacked value, but because you failed to create the illusion of it. The brain stops producing dopamine when the outcome becomes predictable. You were predictable, and they lost the thrill of wanting you. You thought your loyalty would be admired, that by showing up, replying fast, offering support without hesitation, you'd become indispensable. But you only became familiar, and familiarity is the enemy of respect. They began to treat you as something safe, and therefore, beneath their attention, they withdrew, not because you changed, but because your availability destroyed the mystery that once held their interest. Never let them feel you're too easy to access. It kills their hunger for you. The hunger died the moment they believed they could have you anytime. They didn't say it. They didn't need to. Their silence was louder than any rejection. You felt it in their late replies, their cold eyes, the way your presence no longer shifted the room. You became a ghost in your own story, seen but not felt. The worst part? You trained them to stop appreciating you. You made yourself forgettable by offering yourself endlessly. They stopped wondering where you were because you never gave them a chance to miss you. You crave connection, so you overcompensate with presence. But what you forget is this: power is not earned through availability. It's enforced through absence. The ones they chase are not the ones who speak the most, but the ones who withhold just enough to remain uncertain, desired, above reach. The moment you let them feel certain of you, you lost all leverage. Authority doesn't speak loudly. It waits to be summoned. It appears selectively, and it never begs to be noticed. Stop flooding the space. Learn to retreat. Let your silence agitate their nerves. Let your absence reshape their memory of you. Influence is not found in the warmth of constant attention. It is carved into the cold, clean edges of restraint. The less they know where you stand, the more they search for signs. That's when you become valuable again. When you're not there, they won't say it, but they felt the shift when you stopped trying, when you no longer rushed to respond, when your presence became a rare event, not a daily occurrence. Suddenly, they looked again. Suddenly, they remembered what it felt like to want you. That is the law of scarcity. That is how you make them kneel, not through noise, but through absence that speaks louder than words ever could. When presence is consistent, it loses weight. Predictability breeds invisibility, not comfort. In social ecosystems, perceived loyalty can quietly become a mark of desperation, especially when it's unprovoked and constant. The mind does not respect what it sees as easily owned, and those who offer themselves without demand are slowly positioned beneath those they try to please. Loyalty, when unfiltered, is rebranded as weakness. You thought being there was enough. That showing up, staying consistent, proving your presence would shield you from rejection. But they never asked for that. And so, your consistency became noise, a silent signal of emotional need they never had to work for. You handed them proof that you were willing to orbit around them without being asked. Not because they earned it, but because you needed to feel wanted. And in that quiet exchange, you gave them leverage. You tried to be the one they could rely on, the first to respond, the last to leave, the one who never wavered. But in their eyes, that wasn't seen as strength. It became expectation. You stopped being a presence and started being a utility. Every favor, every sacrifice, every unreciprocated gesture chipped at your image. They began to treat you not as a person, but as a resource. And resources are used, not respected. You felt it, but didn't want to admit it. That each time you made yourself available without hesitation, they pulled further away, not in words, but in subtle cues. Shorter replies, colder tone, vanishing attention. You became the one they ran to when things fell apart, but never the one they ran toward when things were stable. You were dependable, and therefore disposable. The more loyal you appeared, the more irrelevant you became. And that's the paradox. What you offered out of sincerity was interpreted as submission. The value of your time collapsed under the weight of your own eagerness. Your time must feel earned, otherwise it feels worthless. You gave it away like it meant nothing, and they believed you. There's a reason the distant are admired, a reason the unavailable are chased, because their attention is currency, and they spend it selectively. You did the opposite. You flooded the market with your presence, and now they see you as common. The tragedy is not that they discarded you. The tragedy is that you trained them to. Loyalty is not about always being there. It's about being missed when you're not. Influence does not come from proximity. It comes from scarcity, from restraint, from making people prove they deserve access to your world. Because the more they believe they already have you, the less they'll try to keep you. When contact becomes predictable, curiosity fades. The mind registers patterns, finds safety in consistency, and disengages. But introduce disruption, an unexpected absence, a pause in rhythm, and the mind begins to panic. In psychological terms, controlled silence activates uncertainty. Uncertainty awakens obsession. What appears passive is, in fact, a precision-calibrated manipulation. Strategic distance, when used intentionally, doesn't sever connection. It deepens it through confusion, longing, and perceived loss of control. You've been too easy to read, too fast to respond, too afraid to leave a message unanswered. But silence unsettles them. It forces them to project, to wonder, to reach. The moment you delay, not in anger, but in calm withdrawal, they begin to feel the void. And the void isn't empty, it's filled with their own doubt. That's where control begins. Not in presence, but in absence that feels intentional. You didn't disappear. You just became unpredictable. You watch their reactions shift. The timing of your silence triggers more panic than confrontation ever could. They start rereading messages. They start questioning tone. Your detachment becomes the loudest signal in the room. That's the power of psychological disruption. Not through conflict, but through calculated quiet. They must wonder where you are, not drown in the comfort of your reply. And the moment they start wondering, you become important again. The key is never bitterness. It's poise. You don't vanish because you're hurt. You vanish because silence rebalances the dynamic. They can't anchor their emotions when you don't confirm their place. You don't give closure. You don't explain. You don't soften your edges. You leave just enough presence to haunt them, just enough cold to make them chase warmth that may never return. This isn't cruelty. It's conditioning. You already saw what constant presence earned you. Boredom, neglect, dismissal. Now watch what silence does. It sharpens their focus. It makes you a question mark instead of a full stop. That question mark is what keeps them up at night. Did something change? Did they lose you? Were they ever in control? You don't give them answers because influence isn't built on explanation. It's built on tension. They used to know where they stood. Now they wait, not out of loyalty, but because silence has flipped the hierarchy. They thought they owned your attention. Now they starve for it. This is strategic distance, the space between what they expect and what you give. And in that space, power is born. When presence becomes predictable, identity begins to erode. Over-availability signals surrender, not of body, but of value. In social dynamics, the one who is always there loses shape, dissolving into the background noise of convenience. Over time, those who once depended on that presence stop noticing it entirely. Attention is reallocated, respect is redefined, and the overgiver becomes invisible by their own hand. You gave everything: time, energy, attention. Handed over like offerings to gods who stopped believing in you. You were there when they didn't ask. You stayed when they didn't notice. You reached out before they ever had to wonder. But nothing changed. No loyalty formed. No bond deepened. Because every act of giving only confirmed what they were already starting to believe, that you would always be there. And permanence, when unearned, always breeds disregard. They leaned on you, not because they valued you, but because they could. You became the fallback, the last-minute call, the just-in-case option. You watched yourself shift from the center of their world to the edges of their schedule. But you said nothing because part of you believed that giving more would turn you irreplaceable, that by being constantly present, you'd force them to see your worth. Instead, they stopped seeing you at all. The deeper tragedy is that you did it to yourself. Every response made without hesitation, every availability declared without demand. You created a blueprint of someone who requires no effort, no chase, no consequence. You removed friction. You made yourself easy to reach. And in doing so, you became easy to forget. You lose your power the moment they believe they can reach you anytime. And they believed it because you never taught them otherwise. You gave them access, but never a reason to protect it. You made your presence infinite. And in psychology, what's infinite has no urgency. They stopped reaching for you because they never had to. And without the need to earn your attention, they stopped assigning it value. That's how relevance dies. Not through conflict, through ease. You think kindness keeps people close. But in the world of power, kindness without distance is just weakness in disguise. The giver's curse is this: the more you offer, the more they take, and the less they look back, because their memory doesn't hold what was always available. It holds what was rare, what required effort, what could disappear. You never learned to vanish, and that is why they never chased. Look at those they admire, the ones they whisper about. Check for, wonder if they'll show. It's not because those people gave more. It's because they knew when to withdraw. They understood that access, once diluted, poisons admiration. They stayed silent long enough to be missed. They said no when it would have been easier to say yes. They let their absence do the talking. You need to become that. You need to stop proving yourself and start disappearing. Stop offering and start withholding, not to hurt them, but to remind them that your time is not free, that your presence is not a given, that your value does not depend on their recognition of it. Power isn't loud, it's scarce. And you've been flooding every room with the very thing you needed to ration. Pull back. Let the silence grow. Watch how quickly they start asking where you went. That's not abandonment. That's correction. That's how you stop dissolving. That's how you rebuild the image they once ignored. By becoming rare again. By becoming someone they can't just reach. Someone they have to earn. Attachment decays in the presence of excess. The mind adapts to what is constant, dulling its emotional response to what once held meaning. In relationships, romantic, social, professional, presence is often mistaken as permanence, and permanence breeds neglect. Only when an emotional resource vanishes does the system panic. Absence reactivates value. Silence becomes signal. And suddenly, the forgotten is remembered again, but only because it's no longer reachable. You pulled away, not out of rage, not out of hurt, but because something inside you realized no one was really listening while you were still speaking. You stopped checking in. You stopped giving. You stopped being available. And that silence, that unnatural quiet, became louder than every word you ever said. You didn't leave with a door slam. You just disappeared. And they didn't notice at first. That was the part that stung. You watched the slow shift from delayed replies to complete disinterest. You gave them everything, and they responded with less. So you withdrew. Carefully, strategically. You didn't announce it. You didn't make it dramatic. But each day, you said less. Each day, you waited longer. And eventually, you stopped showing up altogether. That absence, it echoed. Not immediately, but eventually. Because the mind only registers emotional starvation when it can no longer feed on what it assumed would always be there. They start to feel it in the small moments. When something reminds them of you, and you're not there to react. When they open the thread, expecting a message that doesn't exist. When they realize the space you once filled now feels colder than it should. You didn't change. They just lost access. And now, they'll never feel your presence until you make them feel your absence. That's when the narrative flips. That's when they start to feel everything you once felt, alone. You see, this was never about making them suffer. This was about making them notice. Emotional starvation is not cruelty. It's correction, a reset of the dynamic. Because as long as you were overfeeding the connection, they had no reason to value it. Their attention drifted, their respect declined. And the worst part? You let it happen while hoping they'd see what they had. But people rarely see what they have when it's always right in front of them. Now you control the story by not replying, by not explaining, by not giving them the luxury of access they never had to earn. That distance doesn't just create curiosity. It creates reflection. They revisit the way they treated you. They begin to feel the emptiness they caused. Because when someone is silent long enough, the only thing left to hear is the echo of your own behavior. You became powerful the moment you became unreachable, not in a petty way, but in a calculated one. You shifted from the one who chases to the one who is remembered, the one who lingers in their mind, not because of what you gave, but because you stopped giving. And when they come back, if they come back, it will be different. Because absence rewires perception. It forces them to assign value to what they assumed was theirs by default. This is how emotional power is reclaimed. Not through confrontation, but through withdrawal. You don't shout. You don't argue. You don't plead. You vanish. And that silence, it turns you into something rare, something lost, something they might chase again. But only if you choose to be found. The presence of warmth, when given freely, is easily ignored. Influence operates on imbalance. The one who controls emotional distance controls perception across systems of power. The emotionally restrained are obeyed, while the emotionally exposed are dismissed. Detachment generates gravity. Silence creates tension. And coldness, when used deliberately, becomes the most reliable lever in the machinery of control. You've made the mistake before. Explaining too much, reaching too fast, caring too loudly. You thought emotional availability would earn trust. It didn't. It just made you predictable. Predictability makes you safe. And no one respects what's safe. So now, you learn the discipline of stillness. You learn not to react, not to chase, not to explain. Because every emotional reaction you give away without calculation is a crack in the armor they'll exploit later. You become powerful the moment you stop needing to be understood, the moment you no longer rush to fix the mood or clear the confusion. When they push, you pause. When they wait for your reply, you delay. When they expect warmth, you offer stillness, not to cause harm, but to interrupt the pattern, to train them, to reset the value of your presence. The colder you are, the clearer they see your worth. You are not giving the cold shoulder. You are applying psychological gravity. You've seen how the world responds to those who withhold, the ones who speak rarely, but are heard always, the ones who vanish and in doing so become mythologized. It's not because they are better. It's because they are disciplined. They resist the urge to be available, and in that resistance, they create tension. People project meaning onto their silence. They chase for clarity. They assign power where none was declared. That's not charisma. That's control. You think withholding makes you heartless. That's what they want you to believe. So you stay warm, stay predictable, stay weak. But coldness isn't cruelty. It's clarity. When you're cold, they have to reflect. They have to question what changed, what they did, who they've become in your absence. Your silence becomes a mirror they can't escape. That is how you take control without raising your voice. You let the void do the talking. They will call it ego. They will call it distance. But it doesn't matter, because what they truly feel is discomfort. The absence of your warmth forces them into awareness. That's when influence begins, when they feel your silence more than they ever felt your presence. You're not punishing them. You're forcing them to value what they took for granted. And if they can't, you remain cold, detached, unshaken. Mastery is not about being liked. It's about being felt. On your terms. When you speak, they listen. When you appear, they react. When you disappear, they spiral. Not because you raised your voice, but because you chose when to be seen. That's what makes you untouchable. That's what makes you magnetic. You are not led by emotion. You are governed by strategy. The final law is brutal. Influence doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the coldest, the one who can sit in silence and let the other unravel, the one who never chases, only responds when it serves purpose, the one who understands that presence is not a gift. It's a weapon. Use it rarely. Deliver it cold. Let them learn that access to you is not assumed. It is earned every single time. People crave certainty until it bores them. The ones who are always there, always answering, always showing up, they become part of the scenery, not hated, just ignored. In the economy of attention, familiarity is a quiet form of death. Influence belongs to the ones who are missed, not the ones who remain available. You were taught to stay, to explain, to be dependable, but power doesn't live in being present. It lives in being felt while absent. It lives in the unease you cause when your silence interrupts their rhythm. That's when they notice. That's when they remember. That's when they want you. Not because you pushed, but because you pulled away. The world doesn't reward those who are always there. It rewards those who are missed. So fade, vanish, leave the room before they realize they never deserved your presence to begin with. Disappear and watch who starts looking